mind if I tell this story?
I don't know what you're going to say,
Okay,
but yes.
fine.
So you came into sort of the public consciousness as vocal coaches on television.
It was Luther Vandross. And he said, do you have a vocal coach? And I was like, no. Do you? And he said, of course. I thought he was just great because he woke up one morning and he was great.
Oh, that's it.
David's on fire.
Dude.
David and I were so shocked when marriage worked. You can get past the fact that you've got an incurable disease. There is magic the other side of that. So our children are incredibly intersectional. So, of course, they're mixed race and they are neurodivergent.
How many are non-binary and trans?
What are the figures here?
It takes us right back to the conversation we were having about coaching. You know, some people go, well, I don't naturally get this.
Welcome to the party. That's
Yeah.
literally us. Our trans and non-binary people are way more patient than we realise. It's okay to be different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we keep on learning.
My guests today are Carrie and David Grant, the BAFTA award-winning broadcasters, vocal coaches and campaigners, who became household names when they appeared as coaches on BBC's Fame Academy. They are more than just television personalities, and both have been recognised for their broader services to society with MBEs, David for services to music and Carrie for services to music, media and charity. They are now telling their own story. 3 of their 4 children are trans or non-binary, and all 4 are also neurodivergent. And David and Carrie are sharing their experiences with a deep dive into their life and frequently encountered situations in order to help guide other families. In their new book, A Very Modern Family, they aim to help parents whose children are gender fluid and or neurodiverse, while helping them to understand and have compassion for what their children are experiencing. I remember interviewing Carrie and David when I was but a young, somewhat fresh-faced journalist, and they left me with such a strong impression. Whenever I've spoken about them since, I've said how open, generous, kind and supportive they are. I have no doubt that's how you'll feel about them at the end of this conversation today. And in every episode, I ask my guests to share with me their life lessons, what they've learned from having navigated through the trickier stuff life throws at you. And one thing you can absolutely say about Carrie and David is that they will always pass on their learnings, so the next person doesn't have to suffer as much. Carrie and David, it's beyond a pleasure to welcome you onto the Evergun Show.
Thank you. I don't know what to say after that.
It's lovely
Sounded
being
so
here.
nice.
I
I'm
want to be
basking.
like those people.
Yeah.
But it's true, and I can't remember exactly when it was. I remember it was at the Covent Garden Hotel, and it was a long, long time ago. And
I
we had
remember it.
lunch,
Yeah.
and I just thought, those people are excellent.
Oh, thank you.
So lovely of you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you. It is what's taken us so long?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't. And also, you stuck in my mind because you said one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me that day.
What was that?
You told me I look like Nelly Furtado.
Yeah.
Which is true.
It's true.
Well, I don't know, but I'll take it.
No,
because
it's true.
she's very beautiful.
She really is.
Yeah, you really did make an impression on me at a time when I was interviewing a lot of people. So it's one of those things where it sort of all happens in a blur, but
Yeah.
you were people
Yeah.
who really stood out for me. So I'm
thank
really,
you.
it feels very right to have you on the
Thank
podcast.
you so
Thanks
much.
for asking
Thank
us.
you.
So what's been happening since we last spoke?
Just a few kids and a bit of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
we're still here, which is great.
Yes, because I think the last time we spoke, Olive had just started, Tracy Beaker had just started acting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The very
Would have been
first
super
acting
young.
job. 10? They were 10.
Yeah, they were 10.
Yeah. So
And
it
they
was
went-
18 years ago.
They went to Wales and did Tracy Beaker and absolutely got the bug
Yeah,
of acting.
that was it.
David and I were like, you're not doing it. You're not doing any acting. And then we said, all right, you can go for the audition. And then we were hoping, like, it sounds awful, but we kind of hoped they'd get rejected and then they'd go, oh, this is so hard. I'm not doing this. And then they got the job. And then the rest is history, really, because they just went from one thing to the next and
Loved it. They found it's an amazing thing, I think, when you find your thing very young, because quite often people go through a lot of things that they think they're going to like or they think they ought to do and never really discover the thing that makes their heart sing. But when you find it really early and you're able to pursue it, it's a brilliant thing. It's a fantastic thing.
It's a gift. So you came into sort of the public consciousness as coaches, vocal coaches
Yeah.
on television. Obviously, there's lots more to what you do, but a lot of people might recognise you from that. And so in many ways, you are the guiders. You are the ones who say, you should do this or trust us. This is the sort of thing that you should try, or you're the safe pair of hands. So I always ask people, the first question is, what's your relationship like with risk? And it would seem that you, in your jobs, you're helping people avoid the big risks and setting them on a more certain path. But are you?
Well, I don't think so. I actually think quite the opposite. I think what we're doing is we're helping people to not go into an area of risk pretending there isn't any. We're preparing them for the eventuality of risk, and we're preparing them to be able to navigate their way home if they get lost.
I think that risk is an interesting thing because risk is a lot about change, and change is by nature really uncomfortable. So I suppose as coaches, what we've always loved doing is kind of hand-holding people through those really uncomfortable times, because then you can't say, well, take away your discomfort, because then you're going to have to basically run back to whatever it was you were doing that you felt safe with. And so what we're saying is, face that risk. It's going to be uncomfortable though, and it might be uncomfortable for some time, but you can do it. You can get through this, whether that's just learning a song and singing it publicly, or whether that's much bigger life stuff.
The thing to remember, of course, is that everybody who's an expert at something began as a complete novice, began as somebody who is unable to do something. And, I think that one of the things in life that we probably get taught, if not overtly, then covertly, is that unless you're really good at something, the chances are you'll never be good at it. And that's absolutely not true. So, the risk is, for some people, the biggest risk is taking the risk to believe that they can become good at something that they don't currently think that they can. And that involves, as Carrie said, them stepping out of their comfort zone constantly. I remember once somebody, I was saying to somebody, how good can I be? And they said, as good as you want to be. How good do you want to be? How much are you prepared to work towards being as skillful or as comfortable or as good at anything? Because it means constantly stepping beyond what you can do. So rather than helping people to alleviating risk and helping people to avoid risk, I think that what we do is we prepare people to go into something that involves risk.
I like that. Yeah. So you're the risk guiders.
Yeah. And ultimately risk will at some point involve failure. And that's okay. Navigating failure is part of the risk. You've got to allow yourself to feel those really uncomfortable feelings, to be comfortable with discomfort. That was always in my head. That's what I'm always telling myself. This is uncomfortable. Just be comfortable with the discomfort. It's okay. It's okay. And failure is okay, because you will get through. There'll be something beyond this that you'll have learnt something from this.
Somewhere along the way, and I kind of think it happened in the 80s, to be honest, I think we really fetishized and glamorized this idea of being so good at something naturally. You just needed your one moment and then the whole world will see it.
So true.
And also that failure wasn't part of the journey, that it was just, you're going to be really fantastic and then you're going to be a worldwide star.
Yeah. Someone sold that dream, didn't they? And we all bought into that. And you're absolutely right, Emma. I don't know where that came from, but I think you're right. Because there are people that have natural talent, whatever that is in, whether that's singing or whatever it is, could be all kinds of stuff. But there are people who are naturally more talented immediately. But those are not always the people that succeed. It's quite often, in our experience, the people that just put the hard work in and do not give up. And they're the people still here, still doing stuff.
If talent doesn't work hard work always gets further than talent. I had an epiphany when I was in New York in the mid-'80s. I was making records and I was having hits in the UK and in Europe, and I was really frustrated with my singing and wanted to be better. And I went to New York, and in the next studio to me, in the room was like my favourite singer. It was Luther Vandross. And I stood with him in the lift, and because he's tall, he was about 6'5". That's Luther Vandross. Anyway, he was in the next scene, and it turned out that he was doing vocal production for somebody I'd met lots in New York. It was a friend. So I stuck my head round the door and I listened to them. And then the next day I saw him again and said, that was great what you were doing last night. And he said, oh, no, that was just the guide. We're doing the real thing today. And I started talking to him about singing. And he started using terms that I'd never heard. And he said, do you have a vocal coach? And I was like, no. Do you? And he said, of course. And I was like, I thought he was just great because he woke up one morning and he was great. And then he started talking to me about the fact that singers that I loved, Aretha Franklin went to the same vocal coach as him. You know, like Gladys Knight had a vocal coach. I'm going, hold on a minute. I can learn to be better at this. And so, yes, I actually suspect that what you're saying, I had completely bought into. You are only as good as you naturally are. And it was when I spoke to somebody who I thought was brilliant that I learned that you could become better than you naturally are at anything.
Oh, I need to print that and put it on a T-shirt. That's great. So let's talk about risk, actually. Because otherwise I'm going to go down a very long rabbit hole about singing. So I wanted to ask you, as I always do with my guests, to ask about risk. And we've talked about your relationship with guiding other people. But when I asked you what yours was, you actually said it was having children.
Yeah, it was a massive risk. I think initially because I have Crohn's disease, and I was diagnosed I started getting ill when I was 18 and diagnosed at 20. So there was always this thing in the back of my mind, I think, once I had Crohn's, that perhaps I wouldn't be able to have children. And I think, because I think most people just grow up thinking, yeah, I'll just have children and that's what's going to happen. And then sometimes it doesn't. So I never took that for granted. And I also neither David or I, we just grew up with mums. So we don't know what a husband really looks like. We don't know what dad looks like. We just know mums. That's the role that we were brought up by. So I think that for us, David and I were so shocked when marriage worked. We were like, oh my gosh, we've got this. How did that happen? It was incredible. Yeah. Really, really staggering. And I'm not joking. We were really amazed that, wow, we'd look at each other, every few weeks and go, oh my gosh, we're still in love. And we're like, we're 3 years in. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're 4 years in. We're still doing it 37 years, still saying we still appreciate each other in that way. Because we don't come from families where, I don't come from a family where everyone stays married. And I grew up with just my mum. So for me, I was so amazed that marriage worked. It came with a fear that, what's going to happen? You're going to have a child, and then that's the thing that will make it all go kaput.
Yes.
And so I really feared that. So I think part of me kind of went, well, you might not be able to have children, and then your marriage might go kaput. So actually, it doesn't really matter whether you have children or not. And so David and I were kind of both a bit take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm. We were never sort of people who said, we're going to get married and we're going to have a family. For us, it was just, as Carrie said, it was the wonder of being married. I remember about 6 weeks into our marriage. Do you mind if I tell this story?
I don't know what you're going to say, but yeah, say what you want. Knock
6
yourself
weeks,
out.
6 weeks into our marriage, Carrie came home one day. She'd been out working that day, and I was sitting on the stairs crying. And Carrie said, what's wrong? And I said, I've just realised that I don't have a clue how to be a husband. I honestly don't know what to do. And Carrie said, well, you do what you've been doing, and I'll call that being a husband, and I'll just keep doing what I've been doing if you'll call that being a wife. And that's pretty much what we've done.
Yeah. We don't really have set
We don't have set roles or
that.
set ideas because we didn't grow up with a template. And in a way, that's really worked to our advantage.
Really worked, yeah.
Because, there are people who we've spoken to over time and gone, and they've gone, oh, we're not getting on, blah, blah, blah. And he says this and she says that. And we've realised that, hold on, your dad is married to your mum because you're being what you think a wife is based on your experience and your observation of your mother. You're being what you think a husband is based on your experience, your observation of your mother. And usually they say, gosh, if my dad married her mum, it would be a disaster. So, I think not having a template has actually worked for us.
You got to write it yourself.
Yeah, we had to do it ourselves, and
but
so
I think
it was a
everybody
risk.
does, don't they?
Yeah, and they do, and also you have all different kinds of setups, don't you? So there isn't a standard template anymore. That's a lot broader than perhaps it was in the mid-80s. But I think the children thing. We were 8 years in, and we went to Jamaica, and we were working in Jamaica. We were like, should we try for a child? Mm-hmm. It's like, let's just see what would happen. And then I got pregnant straight away. And so, yeah, that was like, okay, right, now we really, like, that's it now, right? We've done it. And so I think David and I read every single book on parenting that was available in 1994.
Oh, yes, every one, chapter and verse.
Oh, my gosh, we were just so worried. Yeah. Really just deeply insecure about what it would do for. And then it's not like we even got better once we had one child, and like we had had Olive, and then we're like, oh my gosh, this still works. Wow, we're still rocking this is great. And it was like, don't have a second, because you know what's going to happen if you have the second. That's when it all goes kaput. So there's always that fear of, for me, that risk has always been there. So quite how we've ended up with 4 children, I don't know. But we just kind of kept taking
it at some point.
Yeah, somewhere along the line, we just went, okay, it doesn't matter anymore. Just keep doing it.
My fear, actually, the biggest risk was the same as having kids. But my fear about it was that I didn't have a template for a father. So I wanted so much to be a good father. I wanted to be the father that I'd have wanted. But I didn't have a clue how you even began that.
You're an amazing father.
That's really kind.
No, you are. You're absolutely brilliant.
But I was just afraid that I would actually be a bad father, and or just not know how to not be. And that I was very anxious about that.
How do you think you're doing?
I think actually I worked something out, that being a good father is a bit like being a good partner. It's not universal. It's specific to the people you're partnering. It's specific to the people you're fathering. I think I'm doing all right with the kids I'm fathering. I think I'm a good father to our children. And that's all that I ever wanted to be with regard to fathering. I didn't want to be Father Christmas and sort of like the universal template for a good father, because there can't be one. But yeah, I think I have learned over time, and am constantly learning as our children are constantly changing, how to be a father. It's an ongoing process.
When I read that was your biggest risk, I thought, these people know when they're onto a good thing.
Why?
Because the fact that you appreciated what you had and knew that it was going to be a risk, I thought actually there's a real sense of appreciating what you have in the here and now.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We
and
really
wondering
do.
whether to push it.
Yeah. We do. We definitely appreciate the small wins of life. And I think we always have. I think that's one of the gifts of being diagnosed with an incurable disease at a young age, is that if you can get through, if you can get past it, if you can get past the fact that you've got an incurable disease, there is magic the other side of that. And that magic kind of prepares you for the rest of your life. So when all the other things come along and you're like, whoa, that's hard, whoa, this is difficult, what you learn in that very dark space, that very difficult space, is really usable, really, really usable. So, I really appreciate every day I'm not in pain. Like, I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not in pain. That's really good, right? Whereas most people would take that for granted. I certainly did before I got sick.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been struggling for a while to find the vocabulary to put into words what's been bothering me about the culture that we're in at the moment of kind of, and it's because it feels as though often we glamorize defining our personality by our deepest trauma or our toughest struggle.
Yes.
That it becomes our identity.
I agree.
And defining. And even thinking about you back in the day, you would, in one breath, you would say, I have Crohn's disease. And I remember there was a reality show that followed you for a while with your choir when you were in hospital.
Yeah.
And yet you'd be on Fame Academy the next, and you'd be like, it wasn't defining you that you had this issue. It's an experience that you have.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Series 2 of Fame Academy, I didn't eat for the whole of Series 2. I wasn't allowed to eat. I just had a drink, a prescription that I lived on. But I don't know. I just thought, well, I can either lay in bed and have this drink, or I can just go to work. And I thought, hey, just go to work. I can, I've got 2 good legs. I can still teach.
Something I really learned from Carrie, actually, and how Carrie has dealt with Crohn's over the years, is that you can have something without it having you.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
You've still got it. Those truths. So, those things, in regard to what you were saying about, people being defined by the suffering they've gone through, I think it's important that we hear those voices. But you are right. To have your voice heard but not be defined by it, I think that's a hard space to hold, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of growth, I suppose, is learning how to accept this is happening to me, and there might be days where it really feels overwhelming. But the moment you wake up and you don't feel bad about it, or you feel like there's a little break in the clouds, just grabbing that, because that to me is hope. If I didn't have hope, I would be done. I would definitely be done. Hope is what I hold on to.
I mean, one of the questions I always ask guests as well beforehand is, what's the excuse that has held you back or that you make for others? And one of the reasons why it's so high up in questions that I like to ask guests on the show is because I know that I am someone who for a long time would put excuses between me and what I wanted, because it was easier than sort of doing the work. And what I hear here is, it's not an excuse. I'm still going to go for what I want and live the life I want.
It's interesting because the word neurodivergent means that it's different from whatever we think is normal or neuropredominant. Like a neurotypical, most people are neurotypical, but neurodivergent people, and there's loads and loads of people who are neurodivergent out there with various different divergences. That might be ADHD, it might be autism, it might be whatever. But many of us are on the cusp of those things or have traits. And so for me, one of the very definite things is like, no, you don't have an excuse, Carrie, that's it. And it's very, very black and white. And maybe there are disadvantages to me not being neurotypical, but that to me is one of the advantages of being out of the box. I do think I'm out of the box, and therefore it's just black and white for me. That particular area is like, no, you can't make excuses for yourself. Yeah, but I mean, be compassionate if there's something difficult going on, but the minute you've got any semblance of getting stuff together, do it, run for it, run at it. Because you're only going to live that day once, aren't you? Like, you're not going to get that chance again. Right. And I don't want to miss stuff.
That was what you said, and it was interesting, David, that you said not knowing when's the right time.
Absolutely, because I think that when I had nothing to lose. And I was so driven. I would get my hustle on, and I would hustle and push and go back, and doors would slam in my faces, and I'd come back and knock on
Your
the door.
faces.
My faces, yeah. I put on a different face going, hi. Oh, you didn't like the smiley one? I'm thoughtful, I'm serious, I'm an artist, whatever. Doors would slam in my face. I would be going back and knocking on the door. But then a really strange thing happened that taught me something about myself. You see, I'd grown up with nothing material. I'd grown up with nothing social. I didn't have any social standing. I'd grown up with no authority, influence, impact, or nobody listened to me really because, I'm just a poor kid from East London. But then I had something to lose. I had success. I had hits. And I knew that at some point I was going to lose it. Like 1 in 50 artists continues on for years and years and years. And I thought, okay, I've lost that. I don't want to lose the next thing. I don't want to lose this. Let's not have kids. I don't want to lose this. Okay, we had kids. We haven't lost it. I'm a coach. I've learned so much. I don't want to be a coach. I did it first day. I was like, great, I've done it. Had we not been asked, it would never have been the right time to become a coach.
Yeah.
Because I would have gone, it's not the right time. I need to keep pursuing this. And it's not knowing when to take the risk because of fear of losing something that I already have. And it took me a long time to realize that actually there are 2 types of people. There are to people and there are from people. And the people who are two people see an objective and a goal and a desire, and they push towards it. And even if they have to leave stuff behind, if they have to take off what they're carrying to get to where they're going, they will do that. You know, like a rocket taking off and then shedding different, and then a little bit's left and it gets there. And there are from people who are trying to move away from something and so afraid of going back there that every time they look towards moving forward and it means dropping something, they're afraid that that thing they drop may be the thing that stops them from going back to the beginning.
Funnily enough, because when we met you, you were working for OK Magazine, and OK Magazine really features, that particular job features heavily in our history, because that was the time during Fame Academy when the PR would run into the staff room where the people, us, you know, coaches and whatever, judges were there, and they would say, who wants to do OK Magazine? And everyone was being really like, well, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, can I do it? I'm so excited because my mum loves OK Magazine. And I know, and the great thing is, I know it will be chip paper in 3 weeks, but the point is, I knew that it was a moment that was really exciting. So I enjoyed doing Fame Academy. David, on the other hand, spent the whole time going, oh my God, we're going to lose something. What if we don't sustain this? What happens? We need to keep, you know, it was anxious the whole time. And so I think that is, but also you've grown up in a house where your mum was like, don't stand on the chair because you might fall off. Whereas my mum was like, why don't you just try and climb up on the ceiling, babe? Yeah. You know, it's just a different... Yeah, those risks that you have from your parents, if they're risk averse, or just go for it.
So I have really had to coach myself into not being afraid to lose.
Yes.
Not being afraid to lose things, and really believe that, you know what, if I lose something, that's fine. It's because I'm on the way to something better. I'm on the way to something different, not necessarily something more. I think if you grow up with a more or less attitude, then the thing is, I don't want less than I've already got. But actually, if you grow up with an attitude that says, like Carrie, it's a new adventure, then the something different isn't more or less, it's just different.
Yeah. I will mention this because you mentioned OK Magazine, because David, you and I have a lot in common. And that was my dream job. I got that job and I could not believe it. And so I spent the whole time thinking I was going to lose it. Yeah. The whole time thinking I was going to lose it. And now if I go home and I'm with my family and I'm doing something, say I'm moving a mattress or I'm moving some furniture, I look at my dad and I say, let's just assume you're going to say careful 10 times, but you don't have to say it because I know that you're telling me to be careful. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just that those words that we speak over our children or have had spoken over us and what they develop into later. I mean, I've got lots of negative stuff too. I'm sounding a bit like a totally positive person. I'm really not just always a positive person. David, I think, is just so even in terms of his, you know, sort of his moods and stuff. He's great, but you do struggle with that.
Yeah, I'm
fear of loss.
I'm actually a positive person, but it's the fear of loss, and it's also driven. It's funny how I think in life sometimes things grow up almost like weeds or like climbers. They intertwine. So, you know, my fear of loss is it's emotional, it's parental, it's financial, it's always but because those things are interwoven.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? From childhood. And so I've had to sort of come to a point where I go, okay, what is it that really matters? The things that matter the most, I can't lose. The best things in life aren't things.
Yeah.
So if I can't lose what really matters, then what have I got to lose?
I love it. Again, I'm going to get lots of this in an episode printed on stationery and T-shirts.
There's a lot of T-shirts. There's a whole new wardrobe now.
A whole new wardrobe.
Yeah. I might just ask for doubles of those. David's on fire.
We'll do a bulk order, don't you worry. So let's move from that into the obstacles. Now, I asked you about the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome. Sorry, we've gone from light and fun to, we are going to dig into it a little bit because
that's cool.
Yeah, you've talked about, and you've written a book about this, so let's talk about it. It's having kids.
Yeah. Children who are incredible, beautiful, phenomenal human beings that don't fit into the world is heartbreaking. Yeah, it's the biggest obstacle in so many ways. Yeah.
When did you realise that, because I'm not a parent myself, but I can imagine I would think, well, you do this, you go to school, you do this, they make friends, and you think that it's going to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And at some point you realise it doesn't look like that. When did that happen?
So I think that began very gently, probably with Olive, our first child, who was at 18 diagnosed with ADHD. But we know that the figures for black and mixed race children, so when they're at school and there are things that are not quite happening that should be happening for that child, they get sent down one of two pathways. One is called SEND, which is Special Educational Needs and Disability. So that's one thing. Or they get sent down an SEMH pathway, which is Social, Emotional and Mental Health. So we know that children that are black and mixed race have a much higher proportion of being sent down a social, emotional, mental health pathway. In other words, what that really means, in essence, is that the teachers or the SENCO, who's the person that looks after special needs and stuff, will think...
What does SENCO mean?
SENCO is a Special Educational Needs and Disability Coordinator. Yeah, that's the person in the school that deals with that stuff. But that person, or the teachers or the head or whoever's dealing with your child, in black and mixed race children, there's a much higher percentage of children, they'll just go, something with the parents going on there. It's a social issue. It's an emotional issue. It's a mental health issue. So Olive didn't get really looked at in terms of actually having ADHD until they were 18, because they were just seen as, they just misbehave. They're loud. Must be something going on at home. And our experience of Olive at home was that they were just delightful and unbelievably compliant. This is the child you'd find on the naughty step. This is the child that would be going, I'm really sorry. And you'd go, why are you sorry? I stole a sweet out the kitchen. You were like, honestly, get off the naughty step, really.
And they put themselves on the naughty step.
They put themselves on there. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're really, and by nature, and they're still like that now, there's a part of them that's incredibly compliant.
We called them Olive the Confessor in those days.
Yeah.
It was me. I did it. What is it you've done?
So I think that was the beginning, and then we began to realise with the next two children, Tylen and Arlo, in 2009 they were both diagnosed as autistic, and for us, I know for many parents they grieve that. I don't think we grieve that because, I guess, logic for me is that, they're still just the same children, aren't they? They've just got a label now that explains.
Well, then, we have an explanation.
Them. Yeah. But I think what we hadn't thought about was how difficult it would be navigating the world and school and systems and therapy and all of that stuff, accessing. You just imagine, like, you've got Crohn's disease, right? So you go to the hospital and they tell you what pathway you're on and they give you the medication you need and you have your consultant and you're on your way. But if you have a child with special needs, that's not the case. Here's your diagnosis, bye. And then as parents, you are left to mop up and work out and educate yourself. And then you're left to go to school and work out, why aren't school making these adjustments for my child? So then you end up what they call a warrior parent, which, is always used as a really horrible slur on parents. Warrior parents are not born. Warrior parents are kind of carved out of this situation where nothing happens for their child. School isn't working for their child. And you watch your child, I don't know, just losing their will to live, which is what we went through and continue to go through. And when you watch your child like that, or your children in that space, as a parent, it's crazy because you would think the biggest obstacles are going to be in your home, trying to work out how to work with your autistic child. But actually, that bit is easy compared with trying to navigate systems. Navigating systems. And I'm someone that can write a letter, write an email. If English wasn't my first language, I do not know how some parents cope. And we know that access to mental health services since COVID has gone up by, there's more referrals, 50% more referrals. So we know we're not just talking about children that are vulnerable or have got, are autistic or have ADHD or whatever. We're talking about your regular neurotypical kids now are having big mental health issues and breakdowns. And so if you can't access services, there's a lot of parents out there now who are facing those same obstacles, that are saying, I can't help my child. I thought this would be open for me. I thought I'd get this. So I think those are the biggest challenges for me have been, I guess, learning that no one's going to be there for you. You're on your own.
Wow. And so that's really lone. And also, I guess it's lonely. And then you also have to make a decision, I guess, which is I have to put me on hold because they don't have anyone in the system. I have to now put myself in the system. To advocate for my children.
In the place of the system. And then that label that you put, the warrior parent, is born. From carved out of the rock face of indifference and resistance and opposition and adversity and all the things that you would think wouldn't be there, all the people who don't come around, not because they don't care, quite often because they're just not there. Because the funding isn't there, the resourcing isn't there.
It's a systemic issue.
The system. It's systemic. And what it means is that the problems aren't going to go away. So if nothing is done, people end up having to do it for themselves.
So, and life doesn't stop, does it? So you're still trying to work. And there's been many a time where I've come off suicide watch in hospital with one of the children, gone to work, filmed the one show, gone back in, David swapped over. David's done the school run, then we've swapped over. He stayed at the hospital during the day, and then I've finished the one show and gone back into hospital in the evening. And that was our lives. And then we had a child that was just out of school for 3 years because there was no school for that child. There was no school for Arlo for 3 years, from 11 to 14. Really formative years, because they were, at that point, there was no autism schools available at that point. And the mainstream schools were like, no, your child's too autistic. And then the autism schools were like, your child's really fit for mainstream. So they fell into the gap. And when they fall into the gap, you suddenly have to deal with a child that's at home the whole time. And you are then a teacher and a therapist and play date. They have no social life, they have no friends. No. And so you have to try and keep their mental health buoyant. And so
with zero socialization and zero interaction with people of their own age.
Yeah. And even things like, even when Arlo did get a school at the age of 14 and is now in the most amazing school, and people are like, wow, your child got into that school. Wow. You must be so pleased. And I am really super grateful. But those 3 years are such important years for any child. That's when your identity is forming. At age 11, you leave school and it's all Disney, and you get back at 14, it's sex, drugs and rock and roll, and you've got to navigate that, and you've missed all your education and all your socializing, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And as parents, you're trying to just shore up the sides and go, okay, let's try and help you to navigate teenage when you've got these lost years and trauma.
But then we discovered through this that we're not alone. And that is one of the greatest discoveries of this. We started a group, and we discovered that a group of families with children on the spectrum. And we discovered that so many of them were walking an identical walk, with no school, with no socialization, with never being invited to parties, never being invited on play dates because they were the different kid. And you realize, actually, we are alone in company. And that makes a difference.
Yeah, there's a whole community. We have over 200 families now that we meet with. And we've been running that group for 10 years, 11 years?
10, I think.
Yeah, 10 years.
Whatever,
Yeah.
A few of my friends have quite young children. And what happens with young kids that didn't happen in my generation is that you get... these problems are identified, or I say problems, but these issues might be identified a lot earlier. And what it's done for a lot of my friends is it's thrown up for them, my kid's been diagnosed with this. And I now realise, because I'm educating myself, I think I probably had the same...
David had that experience.
Okay, so I get... I get home from the studio one night. Carrie says, come on, I've got to show you something. And I think I know what may be holding Olive back. I think there may be something here. Have a look at this. I said, what is it? Carrie said, it's characteristics of ADHD. And there are 30 of them. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read them. So I read them.
Distracted. Yeah.
I read them. At the end of the 30, I say,
Chaotic. Yeah.
Carrie, I'm so glad that you're doing this, but I think we've got to keep going because there's clearly nothing wrong with Olive because gosh, there's 30. I've got 26 of these. And there's, and Carrie's like,
yeah.
Maybe I'm trying to tell you something. Oh, that would explain so much of my life. I get it now.
Yeah.
And why you were called lazy.
Yes.
And I think that's just it, isn't it?
When
no
I'm
one
busting
said,
a
actually,
gut.
there's a need there. You've got a need. You're super intelligent, but you've got all these other stuff going on.
Yeah, and like distracted. Why can't you just like stay on the one thing? Or I stay on the one thing, and it's like, why are you obsessing about the one thing?
When you have 3 children, all of whom at some point have one of these diagnoses, and you're alone, and before you build this community around you, did you internalize that? Did you feel guilty because you were alone, and you're like, is it something that we did?
Yeah, and of course we have our 4th child as well. So I think that what does happen, the irony of feeling like you've lost your voice, you've lost your agency, that you have no power, you have no autonomy. Everyone is going to make decisions about your child, and therefore that's your life, your parenting. I think those feelings of loss are huge. And I think that's why finding other like-minded people. But it's interesting. When I say like-minded, it doesn't have to be people that have got neurodivergent children. I think we've all gone through stuff in life. And I think when you connect, I'm so much more interested in what people have been through and where they're at on that and where you are in the journey. The
J word.
Where people are at. And so for me, there were great feelings of loss. And I had no voice. And I still feel like that now. I think there are many situations that I've found myself in, even in the last year, where I just thought, okay, I'm voiceless, I'm crushed. And right now I'm feeling crushed, but I know that from experience, something will happen and I will emerge out of this somehow. But it's those feelings are real, yeah, for sure.
In addition to this, you have 4 children. And you also have, how many are non-binary and trans?
What are the figures here? Okay.
Yeah, I need some stats.
Our own little scientific pool.
Because this is another significant step on their journey.
Yeah, so our children are incredibly intersectional. So, of course, they're mixed race and they are neurodivergent and they have different sexualities. And also then the whole gender thing came up in the last few years. And so Olive is non-binary, Ty is trans, and Arlo is currently trans but is more fluid. So, Arlo is younger. So we're just, with all of our children, we're just jogging alongside wherever we're at today. Okay, that's where we're at. Mm-hmm. And so, that's been a whole area of discovery and learning as well for us, huge area.
The reason I wanted to ask you about that is because obviously you discuss it in the book, but it's because it feels as though I haven't heard this perspective of what it's like for a parent to navigate this with their children. And also, I feel as someone who doesn't have kids and who doesn't actually know very many people who are trans or non-binary, it's when I see email signatures from people where it puts their pronouns, that's a really new thing for me. And so
for many people.
And I feel extremely clumsy in this space about the vocabulary that's appropriate because I like to think of myself as an ally. I don't ever want anybody to feel less than or othered or to feel rubbish. But I am aware that by not knowing a lot about this, I could very easily say something and it could potentially harm someone. Yeah. And I don't want to do that.
So you are literally where we were at 2 or 3 years ago. Literally everything you're saying there is where our hearts were at, which is like, okay, this is so new and so I don't know anything about this. And so therefore I need to learn super quick because I don't want to be clumsy. But what I have learned, like just to ease up a little bit, is that our trans and non-binary people are way more patient than we realise. And what they see is they know very, very well the difference between someone who really wants to make the effort and put the work in and do that side of things. They know the difference between that and someone who's anti them. Right. It's the same as when I met David and I'd never gone out with a black guy. And I was like, oh my gosh, people are like, some people treat you really badly. And it's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then some people, so you learn very quickly. Yeah. You learn very quickly, okay, this person's a natural ally. Some people are just natural allies. And other people, you know, there's work to be done. And that's okay as well. You know, I feel like our big thing is really about crossing the bridge and meeting in the middle. Like, can we do this? I don't want to burn the bridge. I want to work with people. If people are struggling with that, why can't we find a place where we're all comfortable?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think this takes us right back, in a way, to the conversation we were having about coaching. You know, some people go, well, I don't naturally get this and I'm uncomfortable with it because I don't get it and I don't understand it and I don't want to use plural pronouns because that's bad grammar and things like that. And other people are like, I don't get it and I don't understand it and maybe I'm not comfortable with it because I don't understand it, but I want to learn. You know, there are some people who don't want to learn and they don't want to know and they don't want to change and they don't want to embrace change in other people. And there are those who do.
It reminds me of, and I know I said this before we started recording, but I'll say it on the podcast, that when I was a kid, if you came out as gay, it was a big, big deal. You might get rejected by your family. Yeah. There could be really significant and negative consequences. It was perhaps something that you would hide. That was that just reminds me of like TV shows I watched when I was growing up. Yeah. That was the experience.
Yes.
Now it is not that way.
No.
But it feels, unfortunately, as though the trans community are experiencing
exactly the same
exact same thing.
Exactly the same.
And the only reason I have hope is I think, well, we do know that tolerance and acceptance are part of this journey.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, I think it's important, for me anyway, I can only speak for myself or us as parents, that we want to be good allies and we want to run alongside. And the most important person in getting the pronouns right is not me, is my child or whoever that person is that I'm speaking to. So it's not about, who cares what I think about, if it's plural, well, somebody I don't really like doing plural. Like, honestly, just get over yourself. It's not about you. It's about them. How about serving them? And then I ask that question, why is it so hard? And I think that's when I realise, for some people, they've got stuff in their own lives and one more change is just one too many. Yeah. So I try to have compassion for something's going on for that person, that they really resist change, that they find that change really difficult. They've probably got their own story going on that's very difficult. So part of me is not so tolerant, but there's also part of me that kind of goes, okay, you'll get it, you'll get there.
And also,
I wish you'd get there quicker, but you know.
But also, you know, on that theme, there are people who feel set adrift from certainties. They knew especially where they were in society. They knew their place and everybody knew their place. They knew what was what. And now here we are in a situation where they don't know their place and they don't recognize the place that they were in because there are all these new elements that they have to deal with. And as Carrie said, for some people, it's incredibly threatening. It's back to that thing of, I've lost something or I'm afraid of losing my certainty. And so, yeah, having compassion for people who also are afraid of losing their certainty is something that, you know, we try to exercise as well.
I think it's a funny one because it's almost like, well, gender is absolute. It's female, male. And so it's re-educating around that and saying it's not up and down.
Yeah.
It's well, how is it for you? I mean,
so people have their own views on that, don't they? You know, I remember when Olive told me they were non-binary, I didn't
Did you
even
understand
know
what she meant? What they meant?
No, it's fine. No, I didn't understand what they meant. I was cooking and we were in the kitchen and they had a notepad and they wrote on this notepad in really tiny writing, I am non-binary. And then I'm like, doing me stir fry or whatever. I turn round and they angle the book towards me and I look down and I read, I'm non-binary. And I look at Olive and I go, darling, that's lovely. Lovely. And then I just carry on cooking. It's almost as though they've said, I like cheese. And I've just gone, of course you do, darling. Bit of brie. We all like a bit of brie. I just didn't take it seriously. I really missed it. It was an epic fail on a parent level. Because I didn't even ask. I wasn't curious. I just got it wrong. And then Ty came out as a non-binary a couple, maybe 1 or 2 years later. And I was immediately like, oh, okay, what do I have to do? And Ty was like, okay, so my pronouns are they, them. Ty's now trans, but at the time just non-binary. And okay, my pronouns are they, them. I went into like, I'm going to read about it. I'm going to be really like the best parent that I can be to my non-binary child. And Olive, of course, is looking at me through gritted teeth like, okay, where were you when I said this? And, sometimes we fail as parents. And that was, for me, I just didn't hear it. For some reason, my head was shut down. Now I understand it and I've taken the time to listen. I've listened to my children. But I also want to say this, that it's not every non-binary person's job to educate every person that doesn't get it. Absolutely. That's why, in a way, it's ask us, because we're not so emotionally connected as our children would be. And I think we won't always get it right either. We're still learning.
And also, we can't speak on behalf of every non-binary person. I think there's sometimes a pressure in any minority. There's a pressure for somebody to come along and explain or to justify or to represent. And we can only explain our own kids and we can only represent our own family.
I remember when I first met David, and almost every white person that met David at some point in the conversation would get the conversation round to the fact that David was black. And I remember after a few months of this saying to David, isn't that exhausting? And he's like, I'm just used to it. But I realised that is people trying to process, okay, what do I think about this? And I've watched people when they first meet our children and they know that they're autistic and they're like, okay, I'm meeting an autistic person. And they're almost kind of going, oh, they make eye contact. I'm like, yeah. They talk. I'm like, yeah, they do. Yeah. Whole sentences and everything. And I think it's just learning about difference and being open to difference. And I think that's what we've got really bad at. Come on, can we just get better at difference, whatever that difference is, whatever your preferences are, whatever those things are. It could be a whole myriad of things, but just to be a little bit more like, it's okay to be different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It doesn't change me if you're different. I can still be me, you can still be you. It just means I might have to use different pronouns. Big deal.
Can we talk about misgendering? Because I just did it, because my neural pathways hear Olive and immediately associate female pronouns, which is why I slipped up then.
Yeah.
And I really apologise. But it is something that I know I not struggle with, but it's just something that happens without me before I have before I have time to pull it back into my face and not say it and use the correct pronouns. Is that something that they have encountered, that you have encountered?
Oh my gosh, constantly, every single day.
So for someone like me, or for someone listening who's like, I don't want to get it wrong, but it falls out of my mouth.
Yes.
And then I've done the very thing I don't want to do. What advice do you have?
Do you know what I loved? I loved watching Ty and Olive the other week were doing like a little sketch in the kitchen. And Olive said, I had to tell someone today I was non-binary. And I went and I said, I'm non-binary. And then Ty said, oh my gosh, I just get your pronouns wrong. I'm so sorry. If I get it wrong, please, I really apologize. And they did this whole skit that went on for 10 minutes. That what it did was it showed me it becomes all about the person.
Yes.
And the poor non-binary person is just left like speechless. Like, it's just a pronoun, honestly. Just what you did was perfect. You corrected it, you moved on. And that's the thing to do. Correct it, move on, and don't over-apologise.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for that, it's, again, we had the same thing in the Black Lives Matter period during COVID, during lockdown. everyone was suddenly texting our children and David and going, I'm so sorry about what's going on. And then the onus is on the family to kind of go, don't worry, it's okay.
Yeah. I've got to make you feel better.
To make you feel better, yeah.
Yeah. So we need to get past some of that.
I was about to say is what I just did a bit like
awkward.
saying, some of my best friends are black.
Yeah, it is like that. But you know what? We have to have these conversations or we're not going to get past that. We have to get past the awkward bit so that we can then just go, oh, you're just Olive. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we use they, them, but you're Olive. Olive is still Olive. Ty is still Ty and Arlo's still Arlo and Nathan's still Nathan. And yeah, it's all good. But I think it just is getting past the things where we're not used to or uncertain of, or the differences. But they're not threatening. Like, come on, guys. It doesn't have to be so threatening.
No, it doesn't.
And I sometimes think that thing of they're just who they are. And, there's a proverb that says if you bring your child up in the way that they should go, when they're older, they'll stay there. They won't depart from it. And what does that mean? Well, to us, that means discover who they are. Discover as they are discovering who they are, rather than investing in them being something specific that you want them to be. And so when people say, oh, this person has changed, they've changed their pronouns, but they've not changed. They're just wishing to be identified as they are. Oh, they're changing gender. No, yes, but they've not changed. Which is why in some places they call like changing of gender correction, don't they? Because it's like, but this has been me my whole life.
Yeah,
there are people
acknowledging
who walk their whole life feeling like they're in the wrong body, and they're just acknowledging it and going, actually, no, I'm going to correct that. And I think it's important to walk with your children, ensure you guide, and when they ask advice, the advice is given. And when they reach because a child reaches a certain age where they're still your kids, but they're not children anymore. So you give advice as it's asked, rather than feeling as though, you've got to push it in all the time.
I think also for us, there are bigger things at stake for our children. I think for us, I want my children to love outrageously. I want my kids to be kind, like outrageous kindness. I'd love, those are the things that if my kids aren't that, I'll feel really like, oh my gosh, I've got work to be done here,
Yeah.
How they identify is just, that's fine. That stuff is kind of, of course it's big stuff, but in the big game, in the larger game, it's small stuff. What matters is how they fit in the world, how purposeful they feel, whether they love people, whether they forgive people, whether they move on, whether they have a good friendship group. Those things are so much more important.
When I asked you what you're most proud of, you did say the fact that they're compassionate, inclusive.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I'm so
good people.
I sit with our kids and I'm like, just teach me some more. Or someone asked me a question today, could you just help me with this? And they come out with stuff that I feel like I'm constantly being educated. And
same here.
And that's why we call ourselves shapeshifter parents, because that is what we've had to do. We've literally changed shape. And I think for many parents, I think we've done a massive disservice to parenting when we have this phrase, I just want my kids to be happy. Or even if you don't have kids, I just want to be happy. Like, what the hell? What the hell even is that? What does it, happy? I mean, some days I'm really happy. Other days I don't want to get out of bed. So does that mean I failed? Or is that just a normal life that contains some good days and some bad days? So I don't aim for my children to be happy. I want to give my children the tools they need to survive this world and prosper and be purposeful and take their place in society, however big or small that is, just that they're comfortable in their own skin and can show up as themselves. And that to me might mean that some days they're sad, so they won't always be happy.
Yeah.
But hopefully when they're unhappy, they'll have some tools. We'll have put enough into them that they can survive difficulties.
You can have sad days within a happy life. It rains in summer. It doesn't mean it's not summer.
Yeah.
The season doesn't change just because it's a day where the sky is grey and you can't see the sun. You can have sad days, you can have happy days, but whether you're happy as a person, well, that's surely about more than a circumstance. That's surely about more than a piece of good news or bad news. It's about the content of your character.
Yeah, that's real identity. It's made up of so many things.
I asked you what your weaknesses were that you worked on. And for you, Carrie, it was worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
And
I'm a shocker for that.
And I wondered if on this particular journey, I think parents are, I am not a parent, and my friends who are parents talk to me, and I think that they can be extremely critical of each other, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And I wonder if you felt that with your kids and the things that you've gone through and experienced.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. Many people that fear criticism enter the industry that we're in, which is really, talk about risks. Like, let's have a really big risk. Let me just sing in front of 1,000 people.
Let me go into the rejection business.
It is the rejection.
Because I don't want to be rejected.
Yeah, so we're in the I'm just completely in the wrong job. So I'm in the rejection business, and now I've got these children that have multiple intersections, and and then we've written a book, like, people might reject us. And part of me, I hate that. I hate that I have that weakness. I'd like to just be like David. David's like, hey, it's fine. Not everyone's going to like you. I'm like, yeah, but they just said something.
You fine? Or is that...
He genuinely is.
Yeah, I think
Is that a factory setting?
No. I mean, I really like people. But I'm sure I don't like everybody. So I can't expect everybody to like me.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who
Be
likes
more David.
everybody.
That's my thing. I love that about David. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to David when I first met him, was just he's very water off a duck's back if someone criticises him. Even me. I can be quite harsh with David. And he's just like, yeah, I love that. But yeah, for me, I'm sensitive. I'm very, very sensitive. And that sensitivity, I've learned as I've got older that sensitivity is a really good thing, because that's the thing that makes me empathetic and compassionate. But the weak side of it is that it makes me sensitive to what other people think.
Porous is the word I like to use
Oh, I like that.
when
That's
I'm
good.
describing my sensitivity.
Yeah. It seeps in.
It seeps in, and sometimes you just have to spend a few days away from everybody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Actually, face to face, I'm probably fine, because then I see someone's humanity. It's harder online. I think when I see comments online,
I think, with comments online, I just think this comment is about you, not about me.
Yes.
And I'm actually, so I'm better at dealing with online comments than perhaps real life.
So we need to do a swapsy.
Yeah. Let's do a course.
I need
We'll
your
coach each other.
gems,
We're drawing to the end of our time together, but I wanted to ask you about a time when you were wrong. And I thought you both gave the most incredible answers. David, yours was really powerful about insisting that your child went to school because you were more worried about the attendance officer than actually what might have been going on with your child's mental health.
Absolutely. There were days when our children were just, I can't go in. Please, I can't go in. And I'd be like, no, you're going in. Because, how do you raise children? Well, you set boundaries, and you keep them. And that's how kids,
wills.
Yeah, that's how kids learn discipline. It's a battle of the wills, and you're not going to win. I can play this game all day long, sort of thinking. And also, I don't want to have the school on my back saying, where are they? Why are they not here? What's happening? So go in, you'll be fine when you get there. And it took me a long time to realize that was more about what I thought good parenting was, and not wanting the school to think badly of my child, than it was about my kid's mental health. That actually, hold on a minute, being a good parent means being what they need. Not what being what the school needs them to be, or what I think they should be, but what they need. And you're going made them feel totally unprotected. And it took me ages to realize that actually they couldn't even get protection from me. They couldn't get understanding from me because I was throwing them right back into the environment that they were trying to escape from and telling them that there was no alternative. Therefore, I wasn't offering safe haven at all. And I really regret that, because I think that we can do things that we think are beyond us quite often if we know that somebody understands how difficult it is for us. But if nobody understands, and if everybody thinks, well, this is easy, what's your problem? It exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, it's that sort of suck it up, buttercup. Just
absolutely, just do it. Life's like that. You know what? You're not going to love every day. Go for it. And it just doesn't work like that.
But there is a balance, isn't there? Because if you can go from one extreme to the other, and it's finding that space in the middle where you're not giving up, but you're not putting yourself through more.
So on the one hand, you have demand, and on the other hand, you have toleration. So if your child's toleration levels are really, really low, there is no way you can put demands on them. It just... With our children and anyone that has got autistic teenage children that have got mental health issues, they will all say the same pretty much, which is if their toleration levels are low, you can't put a demand on them.
No, they can't do it.
But what we have to understand is all of that toleration and demand is being driven by anxiety. So the more anxious we are, and I think this is the same for most people, the more anxious we are about stuff, our toleration levels go, I can't even do that. I don't even know what to eat now. Can't make dinner. Forgotten how to make dinner. Toleration goes down and someone comes along and says, just make a sandwich, and you go, I can't make a sandwich. That's it. I'm done here. I'm walking out the door. I'm standing.
It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, isn't it?
And you think, what happened there?
Yeah, and people look and go, well, that was totally disproportionate. What's wrong with them? It isn't the thing that they've been. It's all the things that have led up to the thing.
That are sitting there.
Yeah.
So it's I think once we had that view, I mean, maybe you were a little later to the party.
I was.
But you did get it in the
late
end.
to the party. People were leaving by the time I arrived. That's how late to the party I was.
The lights were up.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they'd broken down the speakers. They'd taken the DJ had gone home. It's like I was just like, oh, any sandwiches left? I'll have a piece of cake and I'll go. No, I think that NVR really changed things for you, isn't it?
So I think called nonviolent resistance. We learnt a way of parenting called nonviolent resistance that really helped. And also this phrase that you'll hear a lot, which is like being trauma informed. I think through doing this thing called nonviolent resistance, we learn how to work with our children, how to put boundaries in, but also how to understand they are traumatized by school. And there are many children now who are traumatized by school, especially post-COVID. And it's how we, and actually many adults, even getting out and going out and socializing, all of those things just feel so big. And so we've all gone through a trauma and we've got to work that out internationally, nationally, locally, and in our families, individuals, how we cope with that trauma. And so I think David and I kind of juggle that with our children. Is like, where is this child at the moment? What can we push there? When is it time to pull back? And that's that kind of ebb and flow with each child, and each child is in a different space, multiple spaces, even in one day.
Yeah, and just giving a broad example of how it changed, actually. There used to be that thing we were talking about, getting kids to school. They'd be at the school gate going, I can't go in. Yes, you can. The teacher hates me. The teacher loves you. Nobody likes me. I've got no friends. Oh, come on. That's not true.
You've got friends. What about
You've got friends. Exactly. And you start naming the friends. And it turned into this.
Yeah, so with nonviolent resistance, we would do, okay, I hate school.
Yes, you hate school.
Nobody likes me.
I hear what you're saying. You feel like nobody likes you.
And the teacher actually hates me.
Yeah, you think the teacher hates you. Yeah.
And our children would just go, yeah, okay, you've heard me. I've been heard. And it's more important that we hear our children than we try to solve their problems.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah, and when we did that, they go, okay. Bye then, and they'd go in because they were heard.
So just said, yeah, your friends hate you, your teacher hates you,
we get you.
I hear that.
Completely understand why I'd hate going in there too. And you go, yeah, you get me. Rather than, no, you're completely wrong, and them going, nobody. I have
validating all those
I
emotions,
have no agency here. Everybody is denying my lived reality.
Yeah,
I feel like your book is something that everyone should read.
Oh,
that's really
thank
nice.
you. Let's hope they do.
Because
Go on.
I am not a parent. These are not things that I have to navigate, but this is the world that we live in, and this is the next generation coming up. And I was on a panel discussion a little while ago, and there was a lovely lady on the panel, but there was also a trans person on the panel, and that poor trans person was misgendered constantly and I just watched that and I thought, okay, you could put it down to an age thing, whatever. No malice was intended, but it made me really see it's very easy to become disconnected from what's going on and become the fuddy-duddy who doesn't get it. And then instead of thinking, I want to be an ally, I want to help, I want to understand this, goes, I'm not going to.
I'm checking out of this.
I do think there is a window, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think this book sounds like it bridges that. It means that even if you feel like you know nothing, you can start. It will meet you where you are. So
absolutely.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, welcome to the party. That's literally us. We've had to learn. So 100%.
We've had to learn, and we keep on learning, and we're still learning. And it's tips, it's hints, it's ideas, and it's also experiential. And I'm sure that many people will find themselves in it.
It's about relationships as much as it is about family in the way that we're talking about family. It's about you and your friend. It's about you and your parents if they're still alive. You know, it's all of those relationships. How do we navigate people? It's just people.
Yeah.
And we've just analysed ours and, written about it because ours are kind of on the extreme.
Yeah, really.
I can't wait to read it. I cannot wait to share it with everybody and learn.
Yeah, I might read it and learn something too. Did I write that? Wow. I need to actually start doing that then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Let's
for
not
having
leave it so long
us.
next time.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Please.
20 years or whatever.
Too much. 18 years. Too long. Too long.
If Olive was doing Tracy Beaker,
it is 18 years.
18 years.
It's 18 years. And they're doing Halo now.
I don't even know.
It's sci-fi on Paramount Plus.
Oh, well. Okay.
Like Proud Dad, did you hear that? Did you see
I did hear.
Yeah.
I did hear.
And Ty's doing Hollyoaks.
Oh my gosh. Taking over the world.
Which is not sci-fi, but it's on Channel 4.
Prime time, baby. I'm going to put the links to you, the book, everything in the show notes, but it's just been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been a delight.
Thanks for
Thank
having us.
you.